What's up, money movers? You're watching Daily Market Newscap, where we slice through the noise and drop the day's top moves in minutes. From QQQ and SPY to gold, crypto, and the US dollar, we've got your daily dose of market fuel. Let's light this candle and jump right in.
And wow, what a week on Wall Street. The major indexes are hitting new highs. But if you scratch just a little bit beneath the surface, there's a totally different story playing out. Today, we're going to break down a market that's running on a really powerful mix of optimism and some deep, deep uncertainty. Okay, let's dive right into this, because this is really the central puzzle of the week, right? While all the headlines were screaming rally, some huge companies were getting absolutely hammered. To understand why, we have to look past the averages and get into the nitty-gritty details.
So let's start with the big picture. This was a record-breaking week, and it was basically all about one thing: tech. I mean, the entire market was just riding on its coattail.
You can see the whole story right here in the numbers. I mean, look at this. The Nasdaq jumping almost 4%. That's a huge move for just 1 week. It tells you that investors weren't just feeling optimistic, they were placing some really heavy bets, and they were placing them specifically on tech.
All right, so that strength, it carried right through to the end of the week. Let's zoom in a bit and look at Friday's scoreboard to see exactly how it all wrapped up.
And yeah, that momentum just did not quit. It went right up to the closing bell. On Friday, the Nasdaq climbed another full percent, setting a new record high for the second day in a row. And the S&P 500 was right there with it, gaining nearly 1% and closing just a whisper away from its own all-time peak.
And if you look at the big ETFs that track these markets, you can see that strength clear as day. SPY for the S&P 500 and QQQ for the Nasdaq both had solid gains. But check out gold, that little dip in GLD, that kind of hints at some of the drama bubbling under the surface, since it had a really wild, volatile day of trading. We'll get to that in just a minute.
Okay, now this is where the story gets really interesting. Because if you were only looking at those big index charts, you would have missed the real action. I mean, we're talking about individual companies telling two completely different stories.
So on one hand, you've got this incredible story with SoundHound AI. The stock it went ballistic on Friday. And why? Well, the company reported its revenue had surged a wild 217%, all of it powered by the massive demand for artificial intelligence. A clear, absolute win.
But then you have the trade desk. Now, this company also reported solid earnings, right? That should be good news. But instead, the stock just fell off a cliff, plunging almost 40% in a single day. The market wasn't even looking at last quarter's numbers. It was already panicking about the future, specifically worrying that new tariffs could end up hurting ad spending way down the road.
And this just perfectly illustrates the split personality we're seeing. It wasn't just those two stocks. You had these huge winners like Gilead, which was up over 8% on strong drug sales, and even Apple gaining 4%. But then on the flip side, you had major losers like GoDaddy and Warner Bros. Discovery dropping hard because of their mixed outlooks. It was a market of total extremes.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How can the market averages be soaring when you've got this much pain in certain stocks? And the overall economic news, it isn't exactly fantastic. This gets us to the core tension that's driving Wall Street right now.
What we're really seeing here is a classic tug-of-war. On one side, you've got pure optimism about what might happen next, and on the other, you have some real uncertainty about what's happening right now. And for this past week, well, optimism definitely won that fight.
Investors were just laser-focused on one thing: the hope of a Federal Reserve rate cut, which would make money cheaper and give the economy a boost. They were so fixated on that potential good news that they basically just shrugged off everything else. Weak job reports, data showing GDP growth is slowing, and even worries about whether we can trust the data in the first place.
You know, nothing captures this tension better than what happened with gold on Friday. The price of the metal shot up, nearly hitting $3,500 an ounce on an inflation-adjusted basis, all driven by these macro fears and tariff talk. But then, poof, it retreated just as fast after the White House offered a quick clarification. It was like a perfect little snapshot of the market's nervous energy.
Okay, so after a week like that, you gotta ask, what happens next?
There are a few key things you're going to want to watch that could tell us where we're heading.
All right, first up, there's a technical term you're going to hear a lot: overbought. When analysts look at the S&P 500, they see an index that's climbed really far, really fast. Now, this doesn't mean the rally is dead, not at all. It just suggests the market's run a little too hot and might need to, take a breather before making its next move.
So that leaves us with three huge questions for the week ahead. First, the S&P 500 is knocking on the door of a really important resistance level. Does it have the juice to punch through? Second, can tech keep carrying the team? The whole rally is kind of depending on it. And finally, the big one: what's the Fed going to do or say? Any new chatter from them could change the entire story in an instant.
And that really leaves us with the final thought here. Investor optimism is an incredibly powerful force, but right now it's running on a foundation that's built more on hope than on hard data. The question for the weeks ahead isn't whether the rally is strong. It clearly is. The real question is, are its foundations solid enough to last? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Market Newscap. If you found this update useful, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a beat. I'll see you tomorrow with your next dose of QQQ, SPY, gold, crypto, and US dollar action. Stay sharp and trade smart.